Welcome, 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 everyone, to another episode of the Option Menu Crew podcast. This is episode 26. Your hosts today are myself, Ryan, and we also have Mike and Ed with us today.
Hey, this is Mike. Hope everyone's doing well.
And I'm Ed, and I'm excited to be here.
And today, on this episode of the podcast, we're going to be discussing difficulty settings. So this has been something that's been discussed a lot in more recent years, thanks to two other big topics, which one being Dark Souls, which is a notoriously hard game, and a lot of people wanting there to be some sort of easy mode. And I'm making a correlation here, but I haven't necessarily heard it in the exact same conversation, but similar, I feel, is accessibility settings for people. And part of the discussion will be about whether or not difficulty settings should be considered accessibility options, and what, as part of the discussion of what role do difficulty settings play in video games. But to start off, let's just kind of talk about our experience and how we usually interact with difficulty settings. And in that way, I mean, typically when a game does have difficulty settings, for myself, I usually play on the normal or standard difficulty. Some games get cute with their names, like Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, where they have fun names for all their different difficulties. But then there's other games that mess around with them where they have different names for like easy, normal, hard, based on what sort of aesthetic they're going with for the game, or depending on the experience that they want people to have, because there are more advanced difficulty settings, or sometimes there's special easy difficulty settings and stuff like that, and there's tons of stuff in between. But I typically go for normal, and very few games I replay on other difficulty settings, except for like Resident Evil. I enjoy kind of playing that both on doing additional runs on hard mode or easy mode, which I'll get into reasons for why I would or wouldn't replay a game on difficulty settings. And then, yeah, for the most part, I've seen difficulty settings in more games now that used to not have them, that such as like open world games and like action RPGs and stuff like that. So they seem to be becoming more common. But that's how I usually interact with difficulty settings. So Ed, why don't you tell us, usually what you play on difficulty-wise for games, and just kind of what you used to do with when it comes to choosing difficulty settings.
Well, when it's an option, and like you said, most games these days do end up having some level of difficulty options. I usually choose, I guess you could say like maybe like the second easiest, or it depends on how many settings there are. If there were 5 settings, you're like, I don't ever choose like the story mode. Like some games will have like a story mode where really the idea is to strip out all semblance of difficulty.
Yeah.
And I don't choose that, but I usually choose the easy mode. And a lot of reasons for that is I don't mind repeating something if I'm struggling to get past the part, but some of the games I play, particularly some RPGs, tend to have it where there might be limited save points, and if you do die, you might be repeating up to half an hour to an hour or more. And I just, with the amount of time I do have to play games, I don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time redoing, up to an hour at a time. So I it's not like I don't think I could overcome that challenge, but it's more of a time commitment and making the most of my gaming time. But I almost never choose the hardest difficulty. So usually I go on easy just because I feel like it helps me make the most of my gaming time.
Okay.
What about you, Mike?
I mostly just go with the easy mode. I think I used to try medium more often, but now I'm just like, yeah, I'd just rather just play on the easiest mode, and I don't know. I just like to have fun, I guess.
Yeah, I go back and forth on that, though, because lately I feel like maybe I should go to the normal mode. And a lot of games do allow you to change the difficulty in the middle of it, so if like you're struggling, you can always ratchet it down a notch or bring it back up. So I don't know, maybe my feelings are changing on that, because well, I'll go into the reasons why in a little bit.
Yeah, so on that point right there, I wanted to bring up that I'm currently playing the Mass Effect Legendary Collection because I was a big fan of the original trilogy, and so I've decided to replay 1 through 3 kind of in a row. I might take a break in between because there's still a lot of games coming out, and those games can be pretty sizable. Um, and I'm not doing like every sort of mission, so my mindset's also changed, and I'm a much more experienced gamer from when I originally played the Mass Effect trilogy, and also while I don't remember everything, it's mostly story beats. I feel pretty confident in my memory for like the difficulty curves and understanding that, well, these games aren't really as difficult as they as they seemed originally because I've been through them. I know that, and also I've played a bunch more games now where I've kind of learned that, well, things aren't really as hard as they are, or I understand better what's harder. um, and Mass Effect doesn't really have too many limited resources. Like you have a specific consumable heal item, but it's a full heal item, and I don't know how much you got it. I didn't remember exactly how frequently I got it, but I'm playing on hard mode for Mass Effect 1. And also there's they did some other stuff too that tweaks, and this is interesting because this does change the balance. So they also have a new leveling up system, and I think this is more specifically for Mass Effect 1 rather than the other two because Mass Effect 1 is so much more of an RPG than 2 or 3. So they also have a setting for the leveling up, which they either have the legendary new balancing or there's the classic. And for you guys, the difference between that is um, in the original game, you leveled up 1 to level 60. And so you gained 1 level at a time. You gained a skill point, and you plugged it into your skill tree, and it's a pretty big skill tree. And you get bonuses with each one. In the legendary balancing, they only do 1 to 30. So what they've basically done is they cut the number of levels you earn in half, and then just condense the amount of skill points. So you get multiple skill points instead in one level. Um, I think right now it's been like 3 or 4 for my Shepherd, and then my teammates just recently because I just got to like level 16, so I'm cruising through pretty much, and even on hard difficulty. And I'm not sure if the difficulty is actually upping the amount of experience I get, or if it's just the way the scaling works now. With the legendary, if it's that setting that might be adjusting it, if there is any adjustment. Um, and so now my teammates were getting like 3 to 4, and now they're getting only 2. So 2 points per level, which is fine. They're already pretty stacked. So there's that. And on the topic of RPGs, and Ed, you and I play a lot of RPGs there. There's kind of a built-in difficulty setting when it comes to RPGs, and we were talking a little bit before this in preparation for this episode. Is that the RPGs kind of always had their own built-in difficulty scaling that was completely player controlled, which is grinding. We've heard the term before, and for RPGs that the classic RPGs where you can pretty much go and do random encounters all you want and you can level up. Typically, you either get and Ed, correct me based on your experience, because we've played a few different games here. I think for the most part, like in old school RPGs, you always got the same amount of experience for beating the enemies that just became diminishing returns because of how much experience points you'd need to reach the next level. And in some more
that was pretty much how it used to work, I'd say.
Yeah, and then some more modern RPGs are depending on what game series they experimented with that for balancing, where instead of always getting the same amount of experience based on the enemy, there started being like a scaling where you earned less experience if you were higher level to not make it as easy to grind because they wanted people to stay closer to the to that balance point for like bosses and stuff like that, or even once again, this is completely game dependent. RPGs, even within that same genre, experimented with scaling in all sorts of different ways. Is sometimes even bosses were just scaled in a different way, so that way you couldn't get too powerful. Um, or even the game, or some games even like limited the amount of enemies, so you couldn't do infinite random battles. They usually not have random battles. They just have enemies in the zone, and you could run out of enemies in the zone. So that way you could only max out up to that, so you'd always have a challenge when you got there. But yeah, Ed, how do you feel about like grinding in RPGs? Like, did you Did you find yourself grinding a lot, or did you feel like you managed to, when you didn't have a difficulty setting, versus like the RPGs you're playing now, where some of them do have difficulty settings, and you can kind of adjust that scaling? Have you noticed like how that's working over the years?
Well, actually, I did play an RPG recently that does not have difficulty settings, and you and I have talked about that, and that is Fantasian for iOS and Apple devices, and that was the part one is out right now. Part two comes out in the fall. And that's the Final Fantasy VI kind of inspired RPG by the creator of Final Fantasy. It's Sakaguchi, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm not 100% on his name. I'd have to look it up.
Sakaguchi.
But I think okay, yeah, I thought so. And that one does not have difficulty settings. And I did run into maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 bosses in that game where I got stomped a little much the first time, and I did go back in a little bit, but I was able to overcome it. And the fact that I ran into that with this, I kind of appreciated that it was mostly balanced to where there were a few minor difficulty spikes, but they weren't like really intense, and I did have to grind a little and also think about my tactics. So, that's the experience recently that's got me thinking maybe I should be playing on the normal difficulty in the games that I play, and just kind of learning to play the game at that level, because maybe that's how it's intended to be played. And I appreciated that. Like I guess it was balanced well enough that I didn't feel too frustrated when I had to repeat a boss, and it was satisfying to figure it out and to succeed. So there's a balance. I mean, some RPGs, part of the reason I do play on easy is just because on whatever normal difficulty, I feel like it requires an amount of grinding that I don't want to deal with. Like I played I haven't finished it. I want to go back and finish it, but I played Xenoblade Chronicles, the definitive edition.
Oh, okay.
And that game, it seems like it's kind of balanced around the idea that you're going to do a lot of the side quests, which are very MMO like, very, go here, kill this many things, go here, collect this many things. And they make it easy in the new one where the quest system is really streamlined. You don't have to go back to the quest giver to get your reward. Once you kill them, it's just to get the reward. So they're easy to complete, but I think it's kind of balanced around the idea that you're going to be doing a lot of those, and I didn't necessarily want to do a lot of those. So I put the difficulty down to, I forgot what they called it. It wasn't easy. It might have been casual or something, but I just, sometimes lowering the difficulty to me brings it to a level where I don't have to grind, which I don't enjoy too much. Although it depends. Like, it depends on the game if I really enjoy the combat or the gameplay loop. But for that one, I didn't want to deal with the level of grinding that I did start on normal, and I felt it was kind of frustrating, so I bumped it down.
Okay. And then
but
one more.
You're right that RPGs do have that built-in. They do have that built-in difficulty option where you do kind of have some choice over, how difficult you make it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and now RPGs are coming even with actual overall difficulty settings, and then you still have the ability to grind or not grind. But one more point about Fantasian, as long as we're bringing it up, since it's a newer game. How did you feel about their other unique mechanic, the random battle stacker? I don't know what they call it in the game, but I remember the feature, which, for our listeners, this other signature feature of Fantasian is that it has classic random battles like old school RPGs, which means that you don't see the enemies on the map while you're running around, and what happens is enemies, at some point, after a certain number of steps or whatnot, an enemy will just attack and you'll start a battle encounter. However, Fantasian has a feature where you can stack up to 30 battles and add elaborate. I don't know if you can expand that number eventually or if it's locked at 30 the entire time. But how did you feel about that feature in terms of difficulty for the experience? Did it adjust it up, down? Did it not really make a difference? If you could share your thoughts.
So it's called the dimension system, like combination of dimension and dungeon.
Oh yes.
And you can't actually stack 30 battles. You can stack 30 enemies. So if you get a random encounter that has 8 enemies, it adds 8 to that thing, 8 to that container. So it's not 30 battles, it's 30 enemies. And then when you go into that battle, you don't fight all 30 at once. You fight maybe 6 to 10, and then as you destroy them, it adds more to the battlefield, and you have the ability to hit multiple enemies at once. And you know, if you're killing the ones that are soon in the turn order, you can get rid of a lot of them before taking it, so you can more efficiently take out the enemies than if they were in a single battle. The only point where I didn't use that is if I were like by myself, like I didn't have a whole party. Like you don't want to go into that if it's only like one character. So it was helpful. Even when I had it turned off, I didn't mind the random battles that much. Like I really thought it was going to be hard going back to a game with random battles, but you know, now it makes me think that if I did want to go back and play older games that had random battles, like I could do that. So I hadn't played a game with random encounters in a while, so I wasn't sure how I would like it, but I really did enjoy the game.
So you can actually,
but that was a good way to kind of manage them.
Okay, so you can actually turn off the dimension system as well.
Yeah, you could turn it on and off. And you do have to clear it out before you reach 30, because if you reach 30 and you haven't cleared them out, you'll just automatically go into the dimension battle, and hey, you got to deal with 30 enemies right now, whether you want to or not.
Then one last question there. Is there any sort of options for expanding it to stock more enemies or to purge them? And like, I'd imagine that would be like, okay, here's either a consumable item or at the save point you can purge them, but you sacrifice all the experience points that you could have earned, or money and items. I assume all that's still there. Was there any sort of system like that, or was it just straight up like, if you have the dimension system on, you're going to have to fight these guys, it's always a cap of 30, etc.?
It was always the same. And maybe that was because, like, I feel like if it gave you the option to avoid all these battles, you might be under leveled. Like, it was pretty closely balanced that, most boss battles going in, you have what you needed to beat them. There were only a few where I had to gain like one extra level, maybe grinding for 10 or 20 minutes. So like, I think if they had let you avoid battles in that way, it wouldn't have been as well balanced. So it does a pretty good job with giving you the number of battles that you need to be able to handle everything at each point in the game.
Okay, and I do want to come back to RPG.
I think it was pretty well balanced.
Sorry, yeah, there's just a little bit of a delay here between with Edna, so apologies everyone if we're speaking out of turn. Guys, just just be polite. So yes, I do want to come back to RPGs in a minute, but Mike, I want to talk to you because you don't really play RPGs, so I wanted to ask you about like Mario games, because they've experimented with difficulty settings in a couple different ways. Now, let's see, because there's Mario 3D World, which you've played recently, and you also played Mario Odyssey. I forget, but was there difficulty settings in either of those games?
I can't remember, honestly.
Okay. Now, I do remember, though, and I think Odyssey had something similar. I forget exactly how, but
I don't think 3D World did. I don't remember choosing any difficulty settings in 3D World.
Right, but doesn't 3D World have a special assisting item? Is it like a super cat bell or something? If you've died so many times in the level, then you get that or an assistant.
Yeah.
Can you describe how that system works?
Yeah, so like if you're not doing well, then you automatically get like a power up that makes you like, I think it's the leaf, and it makes you invincible.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah, you can just like run through the level then, but like you could still die from like jumping off a cliff or whatever. It doesn't like fly you back onto the cliff, but it makes you invincible. And if I die that many times, I still don't usually get it unless I'm like really angry.
Right, it drops it into the game, but you don't have to take it if you don't want to. It just tells you, hey, you got this item here if you want.
Yeah, if you want. I think that's a good way to do it, because if you have like a kid playing or something and they're getting frustrated, you can be like, oh, just get this power up and we can keep going. It's not a big deal. I don't know how many how many people actually need that assist, but I think it's a good idea overall. And wasn't there like in Donkey Kong, there was like a Funky Kong mode or something like that. And
Tropical Freeze, yeah.
In the
And
Switch version of Tropical Freeze, yes, they added the mode where you could play as Funky Kong, and he had special abilities that just made him basically an overpowered character, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. That was the nature of it, was to and we're kind of talking about games where they have more clever ways of doing difficulty settings instead of or difficulty modifiers, rather than have an overall setting that there's kind of a stigma. And the point of this podcast is not to shame people for choosing difficulty settings. So guys, don't feel bad about explaining why you choose easy mode or whatnot. This is not about goodness. This is more about just discussing difficulty settings as a whole. So yeah, there's that. But also, wanted to ask in comparison. First off, Mike, do you remember if Mario Odyssey had some sort of assistive thing if you were struggling?
I have to go back, and it's been a while since I've played that game, but
okay.
I have to go back and check.
All right.
And see.
Then
I think my understanding of Mario Odyssey is they kind of give the difficulty options just in the idea that the moons that are required to actually complete the game are relatively easy to obtain, but they have tons of other collectibles beyond what's required to get to the credits that lets you can choose how difficult you make the game just by choosing what challenges that you attempt. So that's what I have understood about Mario Odyssey. Is I don't think there are difficulty options like that, but I think there might be also an assist mode, but like most people should be able to finish the core game of Odyssey without much trouble.
Yeah, I don't remember choosing.
But there's tons of other moves.
It's been a while, so I could be wrong.
And that is true that there was the second player Cappy mode, so you could have someone else be controlling Cappy. And I think there was like one or two things that are like easier to do if someone's playing as Cappy. And then of course Mario Galaxy, and I think Galaxy 2 had the same like second player can be using their Wii remote and do the star thing for like collecting stars, shooting enemies, and things like that to help out the Mario player. So there's stuff like that that can adjust difficulty as well. And then I wanted to ask about some of the other games that you played, Mike. So the Spyro trilogy and Crash Bandicoot trilogy and Crash 4. So can you tell us a little bit about like what the difficulty settings were in there and like what you picked and what you noticed like between the differences?
I feel like for Crash there should be like a super easy mode because it's just so crazy like difficulty. At least the first one, like I don't think I've ever beat it before. I got pretty far, like near the end, but It's just like you get there and you're like, throwing the controller across the room and like yelling at the TV because you can't play that anymore.
So
I read that they apparently changed the physics a little bit in the remake that made some of the levels harder. Like something about the hitboxes were slightly off, so it might not have been you, Mike.
I don't know. It's challenging either way.
Okay, and they didn't do anything for the remaster for Crash Remaster that could have added in some assistive stuff like that or whatnot.
Not that you recall. I saw.
Okay.
No, not that I recall. Okay. It's like for me, like picking like the setting, like I usually pick easy, but like it's not really something that like I'm like actively like when I'm playing a game where I'm like, yeah, I picked easy mode or I picked normal mode. Like when I do remember like when I was playing God of War, I think I started with like normal or medium mode, but then like it was just too grindy and I was just, this is not very fun. Well, for me at least, it was kind of annoying. And not that I couldn't beat it on normal. I was like, oh, I'm just going to be God and play easy.
Yeah, no, I get you. Now, did you notice with Crash 4, did they change anything up? Like, how did you feel about playing Crash 4 and its difficulty compared to the previous games? And did they have any difficulty assistive features in that?
They did have like other characters that you can play as.
Were you able to like swap those anytime? So if you played as the other character, that made the stage easier or harder?
No, I didn't. It was for like specific levels that you could play as those characters. You could switch between Coco and Crash
Mhm.
in the game, but I don't think one character is better than the other character. Yeah, it's different than RPGs, I think, with platformers.
Oh, of course. That's why I wanted to go to that because we were talking about one
Yeah.
genre, and I wanted to talk about the difficulty settings we see in another genre.
Right.
So, okay, and then I know we both beat this game, which was Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and I do remember that having multiple difficulty settings, and I looked through those. And also, it showed, based on the difficulty settings, it had the sliding bars with, what changes per things. So, Mike, which difficulty setting did you choose, and did you take a look at what those other sliders were, and what did you think of that, like seeing what changes in the game's difficulty?
I started off with normal, but then I think like halfway or towards the end of the game, I ended up switching it over to easy. I think I was fighting I think is it the sister, one of the like Sith apprentices or whatever. I was fighting her, and I got, I was getting frustrated, and I just switched it over to like the easier mode. But I think it's cool that they like show you like what changes from one mode to the other mode. Like that's cool that they give you like a visual on that.
Did that have any impact on your decision making for the difficulty, or did you just kind of notice it and it was just like, oh, that's neat, and you just kind of went with what you normally do based on how your play experience was?
I thought it was neat, but I just like I started in normal, but then switched to easy, I guess. So
Okay. Yeah, and for me, I believe I started out on hard, and I had heard from some previews that it was a little challenging, and I wanted to try it on hard because I didn't think it was going to be like necessarily Dark Souls-ish, even though I kind of heard it. It's a little Souls-ish, but it wasn't quite as intense as Dark Souls is. And
did you beat it on that mode? On hard
no,
mode?
and I was going to get to that as well. Same thing. I started on hard, and it was fine. It was actually pretty decent for a while, but then I did hit a point, and I think it was they started mixing up enemy types, and they started throwing at you the different enemies that required different strategies to defend and attack against them, and it became that they were so like complementary and they were doing so much damage to me that it was very difficult for me to properly switch between the defensive moves that I need to like block one to block the other and then get the attacks, and I ended up being swarmed too many times and taken down. So I eventually did bump it down to normal, and I think I kept it there. So I would say that part of that was a design challenge where I think, and that's what eventually we're going to get to is, the different aspects that difficulty modifies and then what we like and what we don't like. And so that was one of those things where I feel like probably if it would have been hard, I think on hard mode they were also doing more damage. So I think in that scenario, it was definitely like, it didn't feel like it was quite tested enough or something, and I could have been missing something. Because eventually I did get past it, like you can kind of just brute force it, but it's one of those things where mixing up the different enemy types is really neat. But then if it's to the point where it's almost like you're going to get hit by something because you can't defend against the other thing, because it's asking you to do multiple things that weren't really meant for you to be doing simultaneously.
Right.
I think that was what kind of made the experience a bit unbalanced. And I think that there's a little bit of a design issue there that's not so much the difficulty setting, but the difficulty setting certainly didn't help. But yeah, that was definitely something I appreciate. And I do appreciate when you can change the difficulty settings mid-game, and that wasn't always like that. Usually you pick the mode, you're stuck on it, and you go through it. And now more modern games, they have it, so it's just changing a bunch of switches, so that way even if you reach a part that's challenging, you can bump down the difficulty, beat the thing, and bump it up. Usually the only caveat to doing that is that sometimes you sacrifice achievements for either picking the easy mode or or just bumping down for a little bit and then going back up. Some of the games will also make you like restart at a checkpoint if you change the difficulty. Once again, highly game dependent, so by no means is it a complete rule. And really, that achievement and trophy thing only matters for people who actually care about trophies and stuff like that. So I don't find that personally too big of a detriment, and I think that as long as the game's upfront about that, hey, if you change difficulty settings, it does prevent you from getting these certain trophies. You can't do it like 99% of the way on one difficulty and the other. So that's pretty neat, and I did appreciate that.
Maybe I should like revise my answer, like sticking like I start on normal and like go down to easy all the time. But because like I did that with like Spider-Man too, I think. I'm pretty sure I started on normal, but I'm pretty sure I switched like to easy like pretty fast in that one. Like compared to like Jedi Fallen Order or God of War.
Okay.
I don't know.
I think some games like Spider-Man and God of War, like when you start them, you're pretty limited in your combat options. So I think some of them can be harder in the beginning when you don't have as many things you can actually do to fight the enemies.
Absolutely.
It seems like it's hard to balance the difficulty of a game from start to finish when you have a lot of progression in a game where you get new skills and items that, you know, when you have more tools in your toolbox, it can be an easier game.
For sure.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's a little pet peeve of mine, so that might be something for the other episode, is when games give you don't give you enough skills at the beginning, or they do the tutorial section where you start off with like your full power set only for the story to take it away and then make you re-earn everything, so you get like that sneak peek of how powerful you will be. I'm like, so that's something we'll get into another way.
What game does that?
Prototype 1 famously does that. They start you off super powered and then take away your stuff.
That's mean.
That's the one that comes off the top of my head, but there's a couple others that have done it that I've heard about. So some people like that because it's supposed to tease you for what comes later, but I find that kind of disappointing. But for a lot of action RPGs, I feel like there's or even action games, there's a certain balance to the amount of things you should have, I think, at the beginning that make things that just it's the baseline fun factor of like these core systems that I feel like you're not really doing the player a service by making them available later. Specifically for myself, Borderlands, I don't think there's any reason that the 4 weapon hot slots should be like 2 of them should be locked until you finish enough missions in the game, and they've done that for all 3 games, and I hated it in 1, and I've replayed 1 a ton of times. I replayed 2, hated it every single time, and when I played 3 and did it, and they still had it. I'm like, why? This doesn't make any sense, especially because the backpack is so limited at the start, and the game just keeps chucking guns at you. And it's an RPG, so eventually, like, the whole point is, like, you eventually can break the economy because you have more gear than you need, so you're just constantly selling it off, and everything becomes more and more valuable. But still, just like not being able to carry the 4 weapons, I feel like the extra 2 slots, because they come out of your backpack when they're equipped to the slots, it's like free spaces. It doesn't make sense. Just let me carry the 4 guns, because you're already introducing enemies where I'd want to be using multiple different enemy types, and I feel like you should be introducing the system of like, well, you want to switch to this gun when this enemy's got a shield. If this enemy's got armor, you want to switch to this type of weapon. If you want to slow down this type of enemy, you should be switching to this weapon. Like, I don't feel like, and maybe that's me being out of touch as an experienced gamer, so I'm willing to hear that argument. But I feel like in a properly paced tutorial, you would have that, and you would explain these different things, and you'd let the player experience all this stuff in a much more in a controlled way that's still fun and well paced, and would do that. So that's something that's It's always bothered me. Or in certain action RPGs, like eventually you get like the dodge roll or the block, and I'm like, why would you not have all of these moves at the start, or not having enough combos? Like some of them you only get like a 3-hit combo. I'm like, and then you earn like the 4-hit and the 5-hit combo within a couple hours. I'm like, why not just start with all those basic abilities so you can mix and match, and you're doing at least the core combat functions, and then let us get fancy as we level up. So that's the kind of stuff with like difficulty, to Ed's point, where you don't where
How do you feel about Kingdom Hearts, the way they do that, where they lock away all these abilities and you have to earn them? Because I know you like Kingdom Hearts, but
that's part of where my opinion comes from, for some of that, is the way they did it. But I don't think they really. I think because in Kingdom Hearts 1, like you had the dodge and you had the block right away because they were core mechanics. But you only had like the 3-hit combo, and eventually you could get more. So that's where it's like, I think for the most part it was excusable because you did have enough, and it would have been like the 3-hit combo was like enough, and then the blocking and parrying were like good defensive options in that game. So that was fine.
Did you ever play any of them on critical mode?
Critical mode
what
didn't
they include in the final mix version.
Yeah, critical mode didn't start till later in the series, but no, I pretty much only played on. I definitely played Kingdom Hearts 1 on normal. I didn't play it on hard. Kingdom Hearts 2.
Proud mode.
Proud mode. Kingdom Hearts 2, I can't remember. I do remember that like for. Oh no, because that's it. Because there's the secret endings, and the reason they incentivize playing on the secret endings, or playing on the harder difficulties, is because if you do that, it's easier to get the secret endings. There's extra criteria, which is another thing where it's like incentivizing playing on the other difficulty settings, which I guess we're going to transition on that topic and then back into RPGs. Is like the secret endings for Kingdom Hearts, there's specific criteria to unlock the secret ending, and depending on how easy you played it, I think on the easiest mode you can't earn it, and then on normal it requires like doing like 2 or 3 specific side quests, and then if you play on proud mode or hard mode, which is Kingdom Hearts' name for their hard mode, it would be like 2 or 1 of those criteria, and then if it's like critical mode, which was introduced as like the very hard mode later on, I think you always got it. You didn't even have to do any extra criteria. You just need to beat the game. So I think that's kind of neat that there's like some sort of reward. I do remember for Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, I played on hard mode to start because with that system having the action command menu where it's you slotted in your special attacks, I read that on normal you started with 3, and if you started on proud mode you got 5. And so speaking to my point there, I started with 5 because I was like, I felt like 3 would be too few. It was, and playing with 5 was great. And I just it was an RPG, so the enemies did start out by doing a lot more damage and being a little bit more aggressive. So I just spent a little more time grinding up the area and getting myself a few more levels ahead than where I probably should have been in order to balance that out. And it worked out for the rest of the game, and I appreciated having the extra slots to experiment with at the start. So that kind of stuff is interesting, and it's debatable based on what people play, but those were some other parts there. And before we
I asked about critical because I haven't played it, but from what I've read, I think you start with a different set of abilities, so it's more of a different experience than just being a harder mode. So I haven't played it, but I think what they do is you have a different set of abilities and your growth is different. So I think it's a very different experience, more than just changing a few sliders.
Yeah, no, critical mode's way harder, which they.
I was just curious.
Yeah, it's nice. I was planning on replaying Kingdom Hearts 3 on the critical mode, also with their cheat codes, or I forget exactly what they call them, but with the extra modifiers and things that you could turn on and off for that. Because I was like, the game did feel a bit easy on the standard difficulty, which is something that a lot of people experienced. And I felt like in some situations it was a little more challenging than others, but ultimately it wasn't like. It didn't frustrate me. If anything, the boss encounters are really weird in Kingdom Hearts, especially in 3, because and they've kind of they started this in 2, and I don't know why they did. Which in 2, as you'd remember, you could only beat the opponent on what's considered an actual finishing hit when they have their last bit of HP.
I don't remember that. I played that. When did it come out? 2005?
Yeah.
So it's probably like 15 years
Yeah.
ago that I last played that game.
Okay, so just to refresh for even our listeners, so the thing is, like, it is Kingdom Hearts 2 is an action RPG. It's really fun, but when you're fighting the bosses, they have a special gimmick. They have a special, I'll call it a gimmick. There's a gimmick to their health bars, which is that if they're down to their last hit, you can't actually kill them with one more hit. You have to finish your combo, and your combos have a combo finisher move. So there's this was because in the skill abilities you could actually change, and you could shorten your combo or lengthen your combo so you could do more hits, chain more hits, and then your last attack is always considered a combo finisher, and there could be special attacks assigned to that, and that could do more damage. So when your boss has tons of HP, you could do more damage on your last hit, but in order to kill them and end the fight, you actually have to land that final hit in order to do it. So you'd be in situations with a boss where maybe you'd have a long combo, because normally that's really fun to be able to hit guys like 7 or 8 times in a row and then use your flashy finisher. But then in a boss fight, and I don't think you can't open your skill menu during this to change it. You'd be stuck in a situation where you have to they have 1 hit left. You'd have to do 7 or 8 hits. They might knock you out in the middle of like your 4th or 5th hit, and you couldn't kill them. Even with magic, I don't think it worked. Like, until you landed that final blow combo finisher attack. So you'd have to like prep your builds to be like, okay, I want a shorter combo for the boss on a retry, so that way I'm only need to land like 2 or 3 hits to get the finisher. So when I get them to that last bit of HP, I actually can kill them without worrying about being interrupted. Which was annoying. They didn't have that. Yeah. Pretty sure they took that out in Birth by Sleep. It was definitely not in any of the other Kingdom Hearts. They didn't have that thing. But what I was going to say is in Kingdom Hearts 3, though, what they started doing, and I think a few of the other games had this, is Kingdom Hearts bosses have these periods of invincibility, as they can't be hit out of these moves, or they're doing specific actions where they can't be hit. That's really annoying, because there's times where it becomes it's almost like changes like an American football game where like you're on defense and like don't try to hit them. You're just literally trying to avoid the attacks. And some other RPGs do this as well. Like Nier, both Replicant and Automata both had some bosses that were like this, where you can't really deal damage. But actually, they do it in a more clever way. Both Automata and Nier, because you have your secondary character that can be firing attacks at the same time. So usually what they do is they just increase the opponent's damage or have like a shield, so you can't actually deal damage to them during this. Or Nier Replicant has this, and I think semi-famously, is that there's dialogue that happens during the fight that's supposed to be story relevant. So what they've done is, during the time that there's this dialogue you have to hear, and other games have done this, but not using this assistive feature, and it's built right in, there's no avoiding it or changing it, is that if when the dialogue is happening, the enemy's defense value is temporarily buffed, so you can't do enough damage to miss the dialogue. In most situations, I think there's like 1 or 2 times, especially in multiple playthroughs, where if you're strong enough, you're beating that value so hard you can actually miss some of the dialogue. But you should have already heard it maybe 1 or 2 times before that for it to not be such a big deal. But that's a cool thing that they did, where they mixed in that dialogue. But Kingdom Hearts is annoying because it becomes some of these sections where the enemies are invincible for large portions of an attack, and you can't interrupt them, or it's like a very specific way you can interrupt them, or at a very specific time, and you're just stuck there kind of waiting. At the same time, Kingdom Hearts, specifically 3, because that's the one I played the most recently, this happened in both, I think 1, 2, and 3, and all the ones in between. The block move is temporary, like you have to be standing still. You block, and then there's like a recovery animation, so if you don't time it right, it's not so much a block or a parry as it is just like you'll then get hit on your recovery, and you can't like quickly move out of it, which I don't know why it couldn't be like, especially having played both Nier and Nier Automata and other action RPGs where you can hold the block and kind of move around, you just move slowly. Final Fantasy VII Remake has that, where like your character can do a defensive stance, especially Cloud, and you can block and you can move, but you move slowly and you take less damage while you're moving. I wish Kingdom Hearts would have that. Dodge roll is pretty good. but you can't always dodge. Or in Kingdom Hearts 2, also the dodge was like a special ability, and until the final mix, where you could get the dodge roll from Kingdom Hearts 1 back from the special final form that was the final added in the final mix. But the traditional dodge move that you got from the wisdom form, like you moved quick, but then you had this weird recovery spin because it had a flourish at the end, and that was difficult and added some additional challenge. And then quick shout outs, because I want to keep moving, is props to Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep with Aqua and her dodge being a cartwheel, and you could just keep cartwheeling. That was really fun. So that was cool. But yeah, that was the whole point, is like difficulty can also, lopsided difficulty could be there. And also, like, there's I heard a lot of people commenting, like, Resident Evil 8 has some pretty lopsided difficulty, and I'd have to agree. Like, the starting intro, and Resident Evil itself has, like, a weird difficulty curve that starts out, like, really low and slumps up, but then also goes low again. It's, like, a weird thing, except this one was kind of the opposite, where it started out a little high, then it goes down, and then it comes back up a little bit, and then goes, and then kind of flattens out again, and then it's actually like actually, it loops a couple times. It's like a roller coaster a little bit, which has its ups, it has its pluses and minuses in terms of design for that, but we can move into that a little bit later. So, with your guys' experiences with the different difficulty settings, I do want to ask, since you do play on easy, do you ever feel like you're not getting enough challenge and you want to kind of move up, or do you feel like the way you play, you're okay with easy because you just kind of want to see what the game has to see? And I know it depends on the base of the game, but do you ever feel like you want a bit more challenge, or the thing's a bit too easy? Or are you playing for like a different thing and you're just kind of experiencing the game? Do you ever, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, lately I have been kind of feeling that way. Like, I started, I'm still playing Nier Replicant, and I started that on easy, but I might bump it up to normal because it's really has been no threat from any of the enemies, and I'm kind of want to give that a shot. And I've also been playing Persona 5 Royal, and I kind of feel the same way. I kind of started Persona 5 Royal on, on the lower difficulty, just because I wasn't that familiar with the battle system, and I wanted, but now I feel like I got a good handle on it that I might give it a shot. And I am interested in playing either or both Shin Megami Tensei 3 and 5, that the remaster of 3 just came out, and that one does have like a merciful difficulty, but from what I've read, it's completely balanced in the opposite direction, where it's way too easy. So I feel like I might just, have to take the plunge. And, I get, like you said, you've played for many years. I had a good number of years where I didn't play that many games. So I'm still kind of, some of these games I haven't played that many of them. And I played, another game I played was, Fire Emblem Three Houses, and a lot of people say the normal difficulty on that is very easy and that hard is recommended. So I might do a second playthrough of that. Maybe I'll give it a shot on hard. But I feel like maybe the more and that's why when I played Kingdom Hearts 3, I think I played on normal. I didn't go to the easy. Was there an easy?
Yes.
I don't remember, but I didn't really, and I think I played fun. Yeah, I didn't play on easy on that because I kind of knew what to expect from a Kingdom Hearts game. So, maybe I'll bump up the difficulty on some of these, and probably in the future I might just pick normal on the next game just because I am more familiar with them. So,
what about?
But I do find, and after playing Fantasian and getting some pleasure out of running into a few points where I got stuck and had to change up my tactics, I'm getting more of an appreciation for where being challenged a little bit can be fun. So my opinion's changing on those things.
What about
baby? Saying, Mike?
I was gonna say, what about baby mode or very easy? Have you ever played on those? Story mode?
Well, actually, in Persona 5, there's a safety mode, and I looked at that, but it's so easy in the other direction that I was like, no, that's not going to be fun. And I'm glad I
feel like there's some like maybe Nintendo games that it's like either like story mode or like regular mode. like I feel, or maybe it's not, and I don't know. I feel like there's some games that like they only have like two options. Like maybe
Yeah, that's
I'm
true.
thinking of something different. I don't know.
On the point of like super easy baby mode, I do have to point out for like Bayonetta, and I think 1 and 2 have this. I don't remember exactly. I'm sure 2 has it, but I think 1 and 2 have it. Is the one-handed mode, which is kind of a double entendre of itself, but the point is that it's supposed to be so easy you can play with one hand for that, and I think there's something to that. I don't think that's not worth exploring. Is these extra easy modes for games, because I think we play games for different reasons, and I could see how someone would want to be like, either maybe they're not really good at games, they're not interested in challenge, or they're not interested in the type of challenge offered in a game, but they want to experience something and see, like the story or whatnot. And nowadays, if you really want to see the story, you could just watch Twitch streamers or go on YouTube and watch gameplay playthroughs and stuff like that. So there's ways around it, but in game, it's always a different experience when you're in playing and you might get to make any choices, even when that just means like the game.
Was that the auto mode? Was that the auto mode where it would egg fight for you? The one-handed mode? Because I know like you could enable auto mode and they would just do all the blocking and attacking for you. All you had to do was like move your character around.
I don't remember exactly
in Bayonetta 1 and 2.
I don't remember exactly how it worked. I just know it was called one-handed mode. It was supposed to be pretty easy. It might have been like you only have to press like one button.
Nier games have that option too. Like you can in Nier Automata, you can equip an auto chip and it'll do all the blocking and attacking and dodging for you.
I don't even know. Well, yeah, I'm not sure what the point is at that point. I don't know.
Well, just looking at cool stuff. I think it's just kind of you get to see cool stuff happen, and you get to go
like
through
you
the
were
story.
saying, why not just watch Twitch or something like that if you just care about the story or you just want to see something cool? I don't.
Yeah, it does kind of seem odd when just at first glance, but I get that it's like watching the video is not the same as you being able to like look around and explore, because if you're in the game and playing and it's just on easy, you can still look around, you can take your time, you can explore and see the world that you're in. Whereas when you're watching the stream, it's just, or watching the video, you're locked into whatever they do, and not everyone's going to take the time, especially if there's something neat or off to the side that they could stop, will look at, and it's the same thing that you're doing. So there is like,
well, easy is fine. I just meant like very easy or like baby mode.
Yeah, I think it just doesn't matter for like it's whatever you're trying to get out of the game.
Yeah.
So
I was just gonna say, like, on your prior question, like, like I usually start with normal and then go to easy, but I don't ever feel like oh, I need to be challenged more or anything like that. I'm just happy to be playing the game.
Okay.
I don't know.
So Mike, on that point, and then Ed, I'll go to you. But Mike, I want to hear your answer first. Though, is like, do you care about like feeling like you could get a game over in the game, and like running like Spider-Man's for instance? Do you ever feel like you're not being challenged enough when you're playing that? Like if you don't have a risk of losing your health, or do you not really care? You just, like you were saying, you just enjoy playing Spider-Man, and that's a really fun game to play. So I completely get what you're saying. But is there like some like line for you where, what, this actually isn't as satisfying because it doesn't feel like there's a threat?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not taking any damage or anything like that, or like, I mean, for the most part, you could do pretty well on Spider-Man, but I think I still died a few times even in easy mode.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like for me as well, I feel like there's the right balance where I don't want to die too much, but I always want to feel like, okay, if I'm not playing smart, then if I'm not always trying to learn and play smart, there is a real risk of me dying. But as we all know, like some games are just weird where it's like, you're in the middle of a boss fight, and if that boss fight happens to be long, you don't want to have to replay that boss fight like 5 times just to beat it, because you lose to a simple mistake or They have one cheap attack. It could be something like that. I
I
prefer
think
the.
that's.
Mhm.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I prefer the situation where I would rather be taking more hits and clear the encounter in one clear, but coming close to death like 6 times in that encounter, rather
Yeah.
than dying 3 times during that encounter until I figured out the right thing and was good enough to do that. And I'm not saying people couldn't have that same experience in the difficulty based on how good they are at video games or how well the encounter's designed. But that's where I lean is I don't like to die a lot. And at one point I was having this really weird like cognitive issue of like I hated game overs because it felt like it was ruining the story because I'm like the character's not supposed to fail. So this is like and I've kind of come to terms with that, but I had like a really weird phase for like a year or two where I was like playing games and I hated game overs because I felt like it was ruining my immersion, which is really weird considering, but I just had I think that was like during the first time I was like playing Mass Effect because it's like such a story driven thing and a narrative. I felt like, and I love when people bring up the analogy of like playing a video game is kind of like being an actor in a play where it's like you do that first take and you're kind of rehearsing to get it right.
Yeah.
And I think they might have I think I might have even heard them say that on Castle Super Beast, but I think I've heard it in a couple different places. But I do like that analogy uh, and of playing video games is kind of like being in a stage play.
I hear that. I was just gonna say
Some actors only have to do it once, though. Some
Yeah.
actors are just that good; they only need one take.
Yeah,
some play,
Go on.
some game players are that good that they can just play through on one try.
Right. Yeah, some of those no die Dark Souls first run people, it's a special talent. So yeah, quick tangent question is like, how do you guys feel about like dying in games? Like, do you have any thoughts about like how many times, like, how do you feel about getting a game over, losing lives or checkpoints, and does it bother you? What's your like upper limit for like how many times you're willing to retry a challenge, and or what's your process for dealing with a challenge that might take a few attempts?
I think that's why I start on normal mode a lot of the times, is because I think that it's it's more of a challenge, but then like you get to that point where you're just like you said, like you're on that boss and you're just like dying like 10 times and you're just like, okay, I've had enough of this now. Like I'm switching to easy mode.
I don't mind dying as much as I do losing a lot of progress. So, one thing I liked about Fantasian was that if you did die on a boss, you didn't really have to go very far back to retry, which was really nice. And that's part of the reason with other games I might choose an easier difficulty. Is just because I don't want to have to replay 30 minutes to an hour just to get to the point where I died, and maybe I'll die again. But then again, like, that all depends on how dangerous the regular enemies are, because even those games that do have, like, Persona and Nier, they do have a good amount between save points, but there's always a save point like right before the boss. So if you're trying to replay a boss, it's not like a big deal. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I just need to like get over that fear and challenge myself a little more. I might enjoy it. But it's kind of a mental block at this point. Like, I don't like to lose a lot of progress because I don't like repeating large stretches of a game. So it's less about dying and more about losing progress for me.
Yeah, the weight of the death can also make a lot, which is something like with Dark Souls, as we'll continue to mention, is like when you die, you go back and there's a very limited amount of checkpoints. The game is constantly saving, so it's very hard to like cheat any progress. You lose your currency, which is both experience points and money, and you can go back to it, but if you die in an inconsequential place, or sometimes even die in just in a weird spot, your stuff could be lost forever, but you have to get back to it. Also, you could have to go through a whole bunch of challenging gauntlets because enemies respawn, and then to get back to it, and you still may not get to it. And if you die a second time, you lose all that stuff. Now, there are ways to mitigate. I'm not saying there aren't like strategies built in for stuff, but that's the idea of the way to the progress. And on the other side is a game like Super Meat Boy. I haven't played it myself, but I've heard a lot of people talk about it because it was super popular, and that being a super challenging platformer, which was people always complimented that game on how quickly you were restarted. So even though you were doing your jumps, but every time you die, immediately reloaded, you're back in control of the character, you do the run again, and you keep trying until you get it. And of course, um, everyone's got their own limits and tolerances, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I would equate that also to like a puzzle game, because my next question was going to be like, and I wanted to toss to Mike as well for like Mario games, is like games where you don't necessarily get a game over, but there's like a progress blocker. Like you have to solve this puzzle to move forward. And I wanted to see like, how do you guys feel about like puzzles? Because I've played like Portal 1 and Portal 2. I'm not sure if either of you have played that. But then there's other like
I played both of those. I love Portal.
Nice.
I love the Portal games. Those were great.
Awesome. So how do you feel about like puzzle games and stuff like that, or like a puzzle challenge where it's not necessarily, you're going to lose health or you're going to die, but it's like you're just trying to figure something out. And for like Mario and Crash, and it's like you're trying to figure out the right jump, or trying to get to these areas where there might be a pit or a hazard or something. You're trying to get around that. Where your tolerances lie in that, and how do you feel like for those kind of things where with like combat, difficulty settings can directly affect like how much damage you take, how much damage you deal, how much damage the enemies take and deal, etc., and like resources, versus like puzzle games where things are kind of really set in stone. So, where's your tolerances in terms of that being hard, and how do you feel like difficulty settings should be affecting those? And I do have some specific examples, but like Ed, how do you go first? Like, how did you feel about your Portal playthroughs, and what do you feel about difficulty settings for like puzzles?
I don't remember having any issues with Portal. I think I was able to get through it pretty easily.
Nice.
But I remember feeling like it was challenging enough, like I had to think, and I thought it was really well balanced for my ability. I liked Portal. But I don't know, how do you put difficulty settings into a puzzle? I guess I suppose you can add some sort of assist or some sort of hint system, but I mean nowadays, like, you don't even have to include that, because if you really want to figure out how to do the puzzle,
you just look it on
search it on YouTube.
Yeah.
So but, yeah. I'm trying to think of what kind of puzzle games I would have played where
Pushmo,
where that would be an issue. Oh, I liked Pushmo, yeah. And actually, I just bought Catherine, so maybe I'll have to play that and report back. That's a puzzle game.
Yeah, with Catherine, you haven't played it yet.
I guess the way you can change the. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say with Catherine that once you like become a little familiar with what the puzzle is, what the puzzle mechanics are, you'll understand like how a difficulty setting would apply with that. So I'll save that for a different discussion. But that one has some more clear-cut stuff to it. What I was just gonna ask is, do you feel like, and I've seen different things. So I've played the Room series, which has a nice doesn't have difficulty settings, but has hints. There's a 3-hint system. So what happens is, like, if you are at a puzzle stage, and every time you make progress, every time you solve a piece, it knows that you're progressing and unlocking something and you're moving forward. So every time you hit a point where you haven't unlocked something new, after like 5 minutes, it unlocks the first hint. And then it's like, if it's another 5 minutes without you doing something, you can do the second hint. And same thing, third hint. And the hints scale from like a very vague, but like if you're paying attention, it directs you towards where you should go or what you should be looking at. Second hint complements that, kind of makes it a little more specific, like, you should probably interact with this thing this way. And then the third hint is combined with the 3 is nearly like, look here, like this is the part you're trying to solve, like do this. So I think a hint system is probably like the best for puzzles. And then like, but what about the idea of like skipping puzzles? Do you feel like if it was a puzzle game, do you think like that's something where there should eventually be a like button you can press if it's like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes or something, that you can just go, you know what, solve that part for me, please?
I mean, I guess you could. I mean, you could add that if you wanted to. I don't know if I would want to use that. I think in the vein of skipping puzzles, you could have it so that you're not gated by one difficult puzzle. You know, maybe at each level you have 10 or so puzzles and you can do them in any order. So if you get stuck on one, you can go to another one and go back to it. So that might be a better way to handle. I think to complete a game, at least I would want to complete all the puzzles. I don't, but I can see how maybe if one's too hard for you, you want to skip it. But
yeah, and people are good at.
I'm not. Actually, one game I can think of that I played recently is I was playing on Apple Arcade. This is an old one, but do you remember on like iOS, Cut the Rope? Do you remember that game? Did you ever play that?
I've heard of it.
Mike, you ever Cut the Rope, don't you?
I've heard of it though.
It's this kind of physics puzzle where you have these candies that are hanging by ropes, and you cut them and they might swing around or go into a bubble or float up, and the idea is you're supposed to get all these candies into your little monster's mouth so he can eat them. But you can beat the levels just by getting the candies into the mouth, but there are like other additional challenges in the level where you can collect up to 3 stars, so you have to get the candy to go a certain path to collect stars. So like you can make a puzzle difficult by having optional challenges along the way, and if you're more skilled and more devoted, you'll challenge yourself to complete the optional challenges. So I think and lots of games do that. That was just what came to my mind as when I was playing recently.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that game is fun.
And yeah, so Mike, that what I want to toss to you is like with like Mario games and like Crash and Spyro and stuff, and I think Spyro's a little bit different, right? Is like when you reach like it's just a challenge, like you need to make this jump, you need to get around this enemy, and it's not like a really clear thing. Like in Mario, sometimes there's enemies in the way, and if you don't have a fire flower or power up, then you could like jump around them. What's your like tolerance level for getting around that, and how do you feel like do you feel like you'd want difficulty settings to be able to adjust some of those challenges, or do you think like the way Mario's designed, you have enough flexibility to like be creative and get around? There's more than one way to get around certain challenges.
I think usually there's more than one way to like get around a challenge. Or, I don't think that, and also they also have that power up that you get if you die so many times.
Well, what if you didn't have that? Yeah, because that is a good system. I do like that. But what if like you didn't have that? Do you feel like is there a way you'd want like
playing like
if you had
Mario
to pick
from like 1985 or something?
Yeah, if you had to do like, would you want like an easy, normal, hard, and you'd be like, how would you imagine that work for Mario, and what would you want? Would you just want, well, like 2D Mario, I can imagine like just fewer enemies, and maybe there's more mushrooms and like in some of the places, but
the very easy mode, there's no enemies.
Yeah, there's like one Goomba, it doesn't hurt you. How would that feel?
Your
if like
invincibility star is on permanently, you have permanent
and
invincibility.
What if it was like like the enemies can't hurt you, but they're just in your way. So like sometimes you can jump on top of them, but if like one's towards an edge and you try to pixel perfect jump, and it's there, it doesn't kill you, but it like pushes you into the pit.
I feel like it like defeats the purpose of the game. Like I don't think any of these changes like even I was saying before, like yeah, it's cool that they have that power up, but it's not something that I'm like specifically trying to use. Like I feel like it defeats the purpose of the game, kind of.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I was gonna go ahead and finish your thought because I was gonna segue. That's a great segue for the next question.
Oh, I was just gonna say like, if Pokemon had like an easy mode and you could like.
The Pokemon is the easy mode.
What if you like automatically captured like every single Pokemon? Like whenever you threw your Pokeball, like everything was like a Master Ball. And you KO'd Pokemon in like one hit or whatever.
Yeah, and that actually, so the question I want to get to and transition off of from that is, how do we feel about, is difficulty setting something that should be in every game? Like I said at the top of the podcast, which was Dark Souls. A lot of people want there to be an actual easy mode where things are scaled down. Now, there's been developer and player commentary on Dark Souls is like it's meant to be hard, and there are games that are meant to be hard, but does that mean even though they're meant to be hard, should you still prevent players from being able to have a different experience? Because ultimately you're trying to sell a product. So even if the way it's supposed to be played is hard, I did air quotes, and that's not to be disrespectful to developers. I appreciate their artistic right, but this is the discussion: is should we, just should it be mandated as like part of certification that you should have these difficulty settings as considering them accessibility options? And I don't want to completely delve into the accessibility side yet, but I want to go around the room with our thoughts on that, and I'll go last. But I did want to bring up two examples, three actually, to the start where things are like super adjustable. Now, the first example is oh crap! I had them all in my head now. There was Celeste. I just recently played Celeste, which is a very difficult platformer. But there's tons of ways you can adjust the difficulty set, different aspects of the game in order to reduce the difficulty for that game. And the developers say, and this is where it's kind of a balance. They say, hey, this game is intended to be challenging in spots in a specific way to match the story, match the themes, and do this. And we really recommend that you do this. But otherwise, go ahead, have fun, play it whatever way you want. That's still cool with us too. So that's pretty neat that's even like in-game messaging, and that's also like then their like marketing message is like, this game is supposed to be challenging, but we put all this stuff in there for accessibility on top of like, I think they have some good like regular accessibility stuff in terms of like, I don't know if it's right to just say disabilities, but with different people's conditions and situations, that they have that there. So that's cool, as well as I think that's really cool, and that's probably the ideal balance if a game's going to have it. But I could also see where people say like we were saying, like it's a puzzle game. Like this is supposed to be difficult. You can obviously just look it up if you want to outside the game or whatnot, but we want you to be thinking. Or there's like like I played The Witness, and that was a game that's like, it really didn't give you any help. You were just like, you solve this, you're supposed to pick up on the subtle clues and kind of figure it out on your own. And if you didn't, you didn't, unless you looked up cheats and stuff, which I had a few puzzles that were blocking me. But then, sorry, I now forgot, and I remember this. And so, Mike, I wanted to ask you, Spider-Man for PS4 had a few special settings. I think they qualified them as accessibility options, but they allowed us to not have to do any of the science puzzles and not have any of the QuickTime events. I think on my original playthrough of Spider-Man 4, I definitely did all the science puzzles. I left that in because I like the little
really?
mini game stuff.
I didn't know about this, or I would have skipped it. I would have skipped the science puzzles.
Oh, okay. Well, perfect. That's great. That's what I was looking to hear about. So yes, there was an option for that, and then there was also an option to turn off the QuickTime events. And I think I played the opening sequence with QuickTime events on, and then after seeing that, I'm like, you know what? No, I can't remember exactly what I did. I think I did end up turning them off though, because I was just like, you know what?
The cutscenes, is that what you're talking about? QuickTime?
The QuickTime events and the cutscenes, yeah, where you just have to press a specific button for the scene. And I think for Spider-Man you did.
And when you had to mash a button to like, when you were like saving someone, you had to. I hated those. I didn't realize you could turn that off.
You could turn it to just hold, or you can turn them off.
Was it just Miles Morales, or was it Spider-Man?
Both.
The original?
Both had them.
It was both.
Both had it. Yeah, both had these settings.
I didn't look that deep into the settings, I guess.
Miles Morales didn't have any science puzzles, so there was no option for that, of course. But
oh, cool! I should play that.
But I definitely played Miles Morales without the QuickTime events on, because I'm just like, you know what? There's no real point to these, and I'm kind of over QuickTime events as like a gimmick. So I just like watching the cutscene. Just let Spider-Man do the cool thing, and let me just watch it, and let me do when it's actually gameplay, because there's no choice to QuickTime event. It's pass or fail. It's just a reaction test. It's kind of like when you're like Ed just said, when you're mashing the button to open a door, and you said you played some God of War, Mike, so you know what I'm talking about there. And I definitely for Spider-Man 1, I changed the QuickTime events to hold instead of rapid tap, just because I'm like, what's the point? Like, you know what? Like, it's not like my hands are have any sort of issue with them. I just got really annoyed with having to tap versus hold when there's not really any choices to it. So if there's a thing where a QuickTime event actually makes you have a choice, that's neat. I could see that because then it's like gameplay, where it's like, okay, well, if you do it one way, it's gonna take you down this path. If you do it the other way, you're gonna do this path, and if you fail or don't press either, it's another path. And that's fine because that's gameplay, that's choice. But when it's just pass or fail, I'm over that. I've played Resident Evil 4. It doesn't.
Force Unleashed had a lot of that.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, that was within the time period. Like Resident Evil 4 came out, made people like think that QuickTime events were the coolest thing, and I admit I was on that train for a while too, and I've played Resident Evil 4 a ton of times. Now, I don't need it. It's fine.
All the old God of War games had tons of those. I loved those games. I guess I don't mind them that much.
I don't mind.
Maybe I would now. I haven't played those in years.
I don't mind the ones where it's like a button pops for the finishing command or something, because God of War has that where it's like, oh, you deal enough damage and then you press the button and you do the finisher. That's cool. Kingdom Hearts even had that. Kingdom Hearts 2 had that.
You still have to press the button sequence. You still have to press the buttons in order, the ones that shows you on the screen. That's what you don't like?
No, that's okay. I'm talking about literally in cutscenes where it's pass or fail.
Oh, I see. I see.
Also, I played
Bayonetta 1 did that.
Yeah, and Sega. I was just gonna bring up Sonic Unleashed because both Sega games. Although Platinum developed that, so like Sega didn't develop that, but still, it was something that was kind of copied. And Bayonetta has a lot of influence from Sonic. It's like you collect halos, they're rings, they're gold rings. And then Sonic Unleashed had these QuickTime events, and I think like one more Sonic game had like QuickTime events, and some of them were like if you missed them, you died. And I'm like, you know what? That's not okay. That's not okay. Dying in a QuickTime event is not okay, and I think that's where I realized, because some of them, if they're not timed properly, if they don't give you enough time to do them, it's or if you making a mistake or something, like if it gives you like 5 buttons and you mess up one, you're done. It's.
Well, wasn't that like half the battle at the end of Spider-Man?
No.
Or no?
No, the end of the final fight of Spider-Man was not QuickTime events.
I thought there was where it told you to press a certain button.
It was maybe in one of the fights, but it was like I remember the final fight definitely the final fight and the final part of the fight.
Doc Ock.
Yeah, when you're fighting Doc Ock on the side of the building.
Yeah, but that was part of gameplay. That wasn't a cutscene. I think that's what we're talking about. Like if the cutscenes get like you might still have to press a button to react to something or dodge or something.
Oh yeah, with the final part of the Doc Ock fight where you're fighting on the side of the building, I don't remember if you can actually dodge, but like you can only like press attack, and I think maybe you can move and dodge because you have to do that to make sure because he's trying to attack you as well. But that's almost like a weird hybrid QuickTime event because you don't have much choice, but you have a little bit. But you repeat this. My problem with that is that you repeat the same sequence too many times, and Spider-Man's attacks don't really differ enough. He does like the same like 3 to 4 hit combo on Doc Ock, and you're just there to hear the dialogue. And I'm like, okay, if you're going to do this and you're going to drag the sequence out, you have to do different animations. Because I noticed it's the same punch sequence. I dodge left, I dodge right, whatever. I'm like, no. I'm like, you have to go a little bit further, or just make it a cutscene. Like. I was engaged because it was the first time and the game is really good, but upon reflection, I'm like, that even in the moment, like right at the end, I realized like this is going up a little too long and it's taking kind of some of the sting out. Because imagine if you watched a movie and the person would like, always did the same left right punch dialogue, left right punch dialogue, left right punch dialogue, left right punch dialogue. Like you would immediately go, and it's the exact same shot and they're just cutting back and saying different things. You'd be like, that's not, unless it was like a comedy, that'd probably be really funny. But like if it was a drama, you would go, what is going on here? Why is it literally the same cut to the same 2 punches and they just keep saying different things? Like, yeah, like
maybe they'll make some QuickTime event jokes in the next Jumanji movie. Have they made fun of that yet in Jumanji?
Oh,
I don't know. So. I haven't watched the second Jumanji sequel. I have to the third Jumanji movie. Yeah, I haven't watched that yet, so I have to know. Miles Morales didn't really have any of that. I think there was like a little bit of the boss fight dragged down a little bit, but it didn't have any. It wasn't like a theatrical sequence like they did at the end of Spider-Man 1, so that was not. I actually had a lot of fun with the final boss fight there. It was just a little tough in a few spots where I didn't know how I was supposed to dodge, or if it's not dodgeable, if I'm supposed to swing around it, if I'm supposed to dodge through it, like. But yeah, so there's certain aspects like with that, and I think those different aspects of difficulty. So that's the other part, and then Last of Us Part 2. I know you guys haven't played it, but that you don't need any spoilers for this. And I think you unlock it after going back, because I re-downloaded it on my PS5 once the patch hit for 60 FPS, because I was like, ooh, I should replay that at 60, because that seems like it was really good. I only ended up playing a couple of minutes just to see what it looked like, and I was like, nice. But what I liked is after I beat it, while I was an emotional wreck, the gameplay, as I've said in the review, you can go watch that previous episode to hear my thoughts on that. Like, I don't like calling the combat fun, but yes, like the combat is entertaining. It's just the context makes it makes me feel extremely bad about brutally murdering dozens of people, calling that fun when they're just like, because they're like, it's not like these are villains. Like, yes, it's survival, kill or be killed, but it's still like, it's not meant to draw clear lines. It's shades of gray. So it's like you don't really want to kill if you don't have. There's a situation where you don't want to kill. Even killing killing the infected is actually fine. Like there's monsters there and you don't feel bad. But when it's like the people, it's dicey emotionally. But either way, like that combat's fun. But what they have is difficulty adjustments. Now it starts out with like I think like 4 or 5 difficulty settings, and then it unlocks more. And I think they added more through DLC. Free updates, free update DLC. But then once you beat the game once, you unlock a bunch of modifiers, so you can custom change your difficulty. You can adjust how much damage you do, how much damage you take, how alert enemies are, which effectively changes how stealth works if you can hide really well or hide better or hide less. And then also like how many resources you can find. You can make resources more scarce, and there's like 6 pips, or like it's like 5 or 6 pips maybe between all these sliders, and that's so cool that you can do that. And I really like after beating it, I felt like I think it's really dumb that enemies stand up like can take a bullet to the head, and unless it's like my sniper rifle and they're fine, or take like a bullet to the arm or the leg, unless it's like the infected where that makes sense. But like human characters, like they are, if you take a bullet to the leg, I'm pretty sure you're gonna fall down or you're gonna be down unless something's going on. And maybe if I don't really know what it means like to take a bullet because I've never been shot before, but I'm pretty sure if you've been shot like once, even in a limb, pretty much down. Like you don't want to get up because it hurts, especially anywhere in the head. So, but the only option they could really do is like I could turn on one-hit kills, which I didn't want to because I didn't want to one-hit kill like bosses and all infected. I just wanted the humans to be like, I wanted the humans to be super aggressive, but if I hit them like once, like realistically they're down. They're gonna like I shoot them once, they're gonna fall down. So, but I couldn't really get that middle ground. So, and I'm not saying I need to be invincible as the player. Like I like the Naughty Dog explanation that they use for Uncharted, where it's like your health is actually your luck meter, and like you're not getting clean hits until your final hit, and that's the actual clean hit that takes you out, because that's what would make sense in realism. And once again, I get it. Video games, what are we doing? But for a game like that that's trying to be grounded in some sort of realism, though, I think those things matter. And I really appreciated being able to then customize and be like, okay, I think I had too much stuff here. I'd like resource management to be a little bit better. I'd like to have to scrounge a little bit more for supplies and be a little more on edge. And it's something similar to like Resident Evil, which is a game I do replay on other difficulty settings. But also, Last of Us 2 and Celeste also have good accessibility options. So I'll toss it. I want to toss it back over to you guys with this other big question, and with I don't think any of us really have any kind of like physical impairments that really do this, but trying to be considerate of our fellow gamers who do, and raise awareness for it. Do you think difficulty settings qualify as an accessibility setting in order to adjust that stuff, or do you feel like that's different than like color blindness and needing screen readers, or like having adjustable subtitle sizes, or screen assistance settings like that? what are your thoughts? And Ed, you go first.
Maybe in the context of an action game, they are similar to accessibility settings, because if you're having to do an action in real time, then making that easier can make it so that you can perform it where otherwise you might not be able to. But especially in some of the games that I played recently, like a turn-based RPG, I don't think difficulty settings is accessibility settings at all. I mean, if you have a brain that you can think and you can select menu options, then in most cases you should be okay playing at whatever difficulty you want to, challenge yourself. I don't know. It's tricky because I get, like you said, I'm not physically disabled, so it's hard to say whether, I don't know, maybe I would want to really persevere and try to play at the normal difficulty settings, but I think there's a lot of overlap, especially for action games.
Mm-hmm. And then Ryan, go ahead.
I think they can be like separate things, like accessibility and the difficulty settings. Like you could have like, accessibility mode or whatever, and then separately you can have like just to cater to like people that might have challenges playing certain aspects of games. If you can turn certain things on or off to make it easier for them, I think that's a good thing to have in most games. And also, like, going back to your other question too, I don't think it should be like mandated to any company, but I think that having more options is better for the consumer. Like, I guess it doesn't really take anything away from me if there's like a mode that's like under like baby mode or something like that. Like,
yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with games having easy modes. Like I'm not one of the people that advocates like if a game is made a certain way, like there's no reason for it to not have those options. But have you guys ever felt like you're missing out from like a game being hard and like you just can't get into it? Like I am kind of sad that I'm just not good enough for Dark Souls. And for people to understand my experience, I bought Dark Souls 1 back on 360. I played for people who have played Dark Souls and beat Dark Souls, they'll know what I'm saying. I got into Sen's Fortress, and then once I got to that bridge with the swinging pendulums and then the snakes that are firing lightning arrows, I tried like 2 or 3 times from there, or I don't even remember how many times I tried, but like I got up to there in about 35 hours, and that was just where I ended up being like, you know what, I gotta stop, and I just started playing other stuff, and I couldn't go back to it. I didn't go back to it, but I did try buying Dark Souls 2, and I know that's the black sheep of the series, but I did put in, I think, about 15 to 20 hours with that, and I tried it. I gave it an honest try, and it was still just like, and after I gave up on that, and I don't even remember how far I got. I did not get very far. I felt like, you know what, this series isn't for me. The Dark Souls series is just not my thing. But I think FromSoft is an amazing developer, and I'm always interested in if they do that something better. Now I have heard from their I forget exactly where, but it was online somewhere in a podcast or something, or an interview or something like that. Like Dark Souls easy mode is supposed to be co-op, where you summon another player, because if you have another player in, like the game's not really balanced around there being 2 people. So there's a lot of enemies and bosses and stuff that you can cheese, or even just like straight up overwhelm, because the enemy is not designed to focus on 2 characters at once.
Can that be a computer? Like, what if you don't have a friend nearby, or does it have to be?
I think, yeah, there is some like NPCs that are summonable that'll be like AI companions, so you can do that. But it does, I think it requires like a consumable item, so even then it's like a limited resource. I forget exactly, so I apologize to our Dark Souls fans out there if I'm completely off base with that element there. But I do know like there's very specific spots in the game where you can do the summons and things like that, and then there's rules based on who you can and can't pull in. So like you can't pull in a friend who's too high level or too low level, things like that. But I do appreciate that when someone kind of explained like the game's kind of built where if you're doing multiple people, that kind of upsets the balance, so you can make it easier. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Same with Bloodborne. I tried Bloodborne. It's the same thing. Like I also, and this is me just kind of being a little weird about it, is like if I don't feel like I could beat the game on my own, I don't really want to just co-op it. But if it's a game that, like if I was told from the start, like one of the Souls games, like no, you're supposed to co-op this game, then I'd be like, oh, okay, like I'm not gonna feel bad about that. But it's like, well, this is largely a single player game that has some optional co-op to it, and that's like supposed to be your crutch to get better. Hurts my pride a little bit. That's on me. That's not me. I'm not saying that feature's bad. I'm just saying me personally that's a weird thing for me, and I totally own that. So there's that. But on the FromSoft thing of like difficulty, I played and beat Sekiro, and for me, I realized after playing and beating Sekiro, which was hard in a lot of spots, I figured out the main thing I didn't like that really holds me back from enjoying Dark Souls, other than like the whole like losing your experience points and dying and stuff like that, which I don't think Sekiro had that. I don't think Sekiro had where when you die you lost something, you had to get it back. I forget actually at this point. But was not having a stamina bar to manage, because in Souls games and Bloodborne your stamina manages the number of attacks you can do, your dodge rolls, your defensive abilities, all that. Sekiro didn't govern anything like that. All I had was the parry meter, which was strictly applied to your blocks and your parries. So everything else, like your running, your dodging, you always had, and your attacks, you always had access to that. You did have some limited tools, but that was fine. None of that was reliant on a single resource. So I think that's kind of where I draw the line now, is if a FromSoft game has a stamina bar and it's governed more than like one or two mechanics, I'm out. Like I know that's just gonna frustrate me and it's just not fun. Whether or not there should be other things like that though, in the game. So I think that's more of a discussion for smarter people than me, and I do need to look into some other opinions who actually are people who are looking into accessibility and see some opinions of other people. But I think it is kind of the prerogative of the developers to add in reasonable experience adjusters to let their game be as playable by other people as possible, to open that up, because then they just sell more copies and things like that. So difficulty can be a deterrent. But sorry, that core question, tossing back to you guys. Has there ever been a time where you felt like you're missing out or been disappointed because you felt the game was too hard and you can't like beat it, and there's no options for getting around the difficulty?
I'm trying to think. I usually, that's one of the things I look into a game when I before I buy it, is what the difficulty is going to be. So if I learn that about a game, that it's kind of notorious in that way, then I will probably avoid that game. And with Dark Souls, like the things you mentioned, the stamina bar, the idea that you lose your experience, I don't think they have maps, do they? Like that's another thing that I would find difficult about those games, is just navigating without a map. I'm pretty sure you don't get a map in those games. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you remember. But some of those things are just, but those are like core design decisions that I can see the argument from a person who doesn't want difficulty options in Dark Souls, that a lot of the things that they like that make it difficult, you'd have to redesign part of the game just to remove those barriers. So I'm not the kind of person who's gonna say like every game has to cater to me, and if it is something that's going to be really difficult, there's enough games out there that I can find something I want to play. So I can't say that I've ever felt like I missed out just because something was too difficult for me. Some things just aren't for me.
Yeah, and like with Crash 2, and with the original Crash being so difficult, like I played through all of 2 and 3, so I don't feel like I missed out, if you know what I'm saying. Like okay. I didn't, yeah. You know what I'm saying? Or yeah,
I get that. So you don't feel you missed out on Crash 1, not beating that, but because like you've beaten Crash 2 and 3, so you still enjoy Crash in general.
yeah, I still enjoyed the trilogy or
Okay.
the remastered trilogy, even though I think when I was younger, I think I only played Crash 1 on PlayStation. I didn't play 2 or 3 before, so I guess
Okay.
those were new experience for me as well.
So Crash 1 kind of fits the basis of the question, which is there any game that you've like that was too hard that you opted out of? So
Yeah.
like for me, I said Dark Souls 1 and 2, and then I'm going to transition to another one. But Ed, was there any games you actually quit because you thought they were too hard?
I can't think of any in recent memory because most of the ones I played do have difficulty settings. But I will say I do want to try a Shin Megami Tensei game, but I know they're pretty difficult, and I don't know if I want to play a really gimped version where it just completely removes all challenge. So, talk to me once I play one of those. If I've like rage quitted 10 hours in, then I'll probably be able to say yes to that question. But I haven't tried yet, so I don't know if I'm up to the challenge or. But then again, like I think a lot of the games where I would find more challenging are maybe because they're like physically demanding in terms of but then again, I haven't decided. I haven't played a lot of Fire Emblem games too,
Like
and
the
those can be
controller weighs too
challenging.
much?
Like they were,
No, I'm just kidding.
no, they have like they required like reflexes and that I might not have, and so
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, if a game I feel like is going to be too difficult for me, I usually kind of be like, well, I kind of want to play it, but that's probably not for me.
Okay. So I want to transition to the last question here for today. Although I just thought of like 5 more things we could talk about with difficulty settings, so maybe we'll uh, do some sort of follow-up episode or a follow-up topic and address some of these. Because like I just realized like, oh, remember cheat codes? Like all the old school like cheat codes and stuff. And we kind of talked about where there's all these modifiers now that you can put in as features. So like we used to use cheat codes as like ways of modifying difficulty settings on top of the way we played the old school games. So that was neat.
Yeah, I remember those.
So we've kind of always had that, which is cool. And I'm sorry we didn't mention more of that sooner. Um, but I wanted to end with us talking about, what things do you like difficulty settings change when you pick them, and what things do you like less, like the aspects of the game you like when they change it. And so this is an example I was trying to lead back to, and then I will lead into my answer here with this question with a different example. Another game I opted out of being too hard toward the very end. Well, there was 2. Final Fantasy IV I'm going to cop to on DS. I got to the final dungeon. It just had a huge difficulty spike. I was already like level 80 something or other, and I just got to the point that I was like, I'd go to a save point. I'd start trying to make progress. The random battles would be so tough. I'd start burning through resources, so I'd be like spamming going back to the last save point just to recover my health automatically because they had that feature. But I'd still like every time I go out, I'm still ended up worse off than I was before. So I didn't feel I was like, nah,
Which
don't
game
worry.
was this?
That was Final Fantasy IV, the DS remake. So I stopped playing right in the final boss battle for that. Then the other game I wanted to mention was, because this is a mixed bag, is Bravely Default 1. I really enjoyed that game, and anyone who knows about Bravely Default knows about Chapter 5 and what happens there, and why Chapter 5 and beyond is a super disappointing, weird thing. But that game also had so many good forward-thinking ideas for not only improving turn-based battle systems with their Brave and Default system, which was great. I like that, and I'm not a big fan of turn-based games, but I like that extra element of strategy. But then also their encounter, excuse me, the encounter adjustments that you can make, where you could literally just turn off battles, or you could reduce the number of battles. I think it was like a 5-point scale of like off, like a quarter as many, half as many, normal amount, 1.5 times or 2 times. So if you wanted to grind more, you could turn it up to 2 times, and you could just grind out your experience points. And there was an auto battle mode that simply recorded the last series of moves, or I forget if it was that, or maybe it was both. It picks just the normal abilities and just goes through your fight, so you could turn on 2 times with fast battle and fast speed and just grind out in half the time. Or you could also, in the battles, if you wanted to recycle your set of commands from the previous round, you can just automatically like recopy and set that. So there are tons of quality of life features that ended up adjusting the difficulty as well. But even doing all that, um, and unlike Fantasian, like if you turned off battles, you just turned off battles. And then there was also the other
Yeah.
element where there was chain battles. So you could fight an enemy, and there was a chance that you could fight a second battle immediately after. And if you did that, you got an experience or a reward modifier that would crank up the number of experience points and money, and sometimes even items that you would earn. And I think it was up to 5 battles you could chain, and that modifier would keep going up, but you'd have to each time you do that, you were also ramping up the difficulty a little bit. So all that stuff was quality of life, and each time you had your choice, and you could stop if you wanted to, and that you had all these adjustments, and there was very little punishment for it, and it was just that the game design, they hit chapter 5, there's a huge difficulty spike, and then it makes you repeat a lot of stuff in a way with very little even narrative reward until the very end. And I looked at the final boss fight, and that looked obnoxious as well. So that's another thing old school
What
RPGs.
was this, Bravely Default?
Bravely
Or-
Default 1. I think
Oh, the
Bravely
first one.
Default, Bravely Second and Bravely Default 2, I think have some of that carried over. Bravely
I
Default
thought
2.
one just came out, or one is coming out soon.
Bravely Default 2 just came out.
Bravely Default 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's Bravely Default, which is the original. Bravely Second is a direct sequel to Bravely Default. And then Bravely Default 2 is kind of like the Final Fantasy thing where it's like similar themes and world and stuff like that, but it's a new. And I don't know anything about the story, so I don't know if they're actually connected in a way that they haven't talked, that's not publicly out there. But that one does have difficulty settings, and I know because I tried the demo and I'm like, this is way too hard. What are you doing? I can't even like ramp up into like challenges here. But I think it also has some quality of life features. But I do have to still rent that and give it a try at some point with like easy mode and see if like I don't mind playing easy mode if I still get the right amount of challenge. Where like I feel like I could die if I'm dumb, but if I'm not dumb and I'm trying to play smart, I should be able to overcome this. But I'll come this close to death each time, a couple times during it, and I can bring myself back from the brink, and that creates like a good tug of war. But then, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like there's a lot of games where, like, I'm just wandering around and I don't really know what to do next, and then I just like give up. Like there was like this Lego game on Game Boy Color that I had got when I was younger,
Mm-hmm.
and I just didn't know like what the heck I was supposed to be doing in the game. Like, they didn't like guide you or tell you like what to do next, and I'm just like wandering around talking to everybody. And I'm like, okay, I talked to everybody. Now what do I do?
Yeah, and that yep, and that's a different type of challenge there where the game is not properly signposting or doesn't give you enough additional support there to if you're lost. Like
I kind of feel like Zelda to some degree does that in some of their games. Like maybe I was just dumb. I don't know.
No, like if you're not, I wouldn't say like dumb, but if you're inexperienced with that type of game, definitely like if you're switching genres and you haven't played it, or games are trying to rely on historical knowledge of a series, that can definitely be problematic if you're not putting in assistive features to help people get caught up. Or say even just from normal life, you play a game. This is a longer form game, but you're only able to play like maybe once or twice every 2 weeks or something, or like you play now, something comes up and you don't get to play for another month and you jump back in. That's why like some games start having like these recap features or things like that, or there's much better detailed notes and mission logs so you can look and be like, where was I? What did I forget? What do I need to know? And they list, and so games have gotten a lot better in modern times of putting all of that assistive information to help you catch back up in there. So that's also a different type of difficulty and maybe even accessibility. And we might do that might actually be a good topic for episode is quality of life features. And that blends in with this. So that's probably where we'll revisit with that. So great inspiration there, Mike. But yeah, so for me, I wanted to finish the final point here and before tossing to you guys for your answers with what I do like and what I don't like when difficulty settings change. I like with Resident Evil, because I've replayed those games the most and played on different difficulties. I prefer when playing on a harder difficulty increases the challenge, but also changes the experience in a meaningful way, such as like moving up some of the enemy types or moving item placement around. And yes, this will vary wildly between games, but I think you'll understand what I'm getting at and how you could apply that to different games. Where like with Resident Evil, it's supposed to be a resource intensive game, and I just recently finished playing Resident Evil Village or Resident Evil 8 Village, Resident Evil 8 Village. Um, the number 8 is kind of omitted, but it's in the logo. Whatever. It's
Wait, that's already out?
yeah, it's been out.
Oh,
weeks.
I remember like talking about it last year.
Yep, no, it's out, out, beaten, loved,
Yeah,
beloved.
it's already June. It's already June of 2021.
Wait, it
Mike.
is?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, it came out last month. Sold 4 million copies so far. Good on you, Capcom, for making another decent game, even though it's not that great a Resident Evil game. But
June when we talked about it, or was it August? Yeah.
That was a while ago. We're
Mike
getting
is trapped in
sidetracked.
that flat circle of time that the pandemic has put us in. But yeah, but what Resident Evil, so I like it when it remixes it. And Resident Evil 7 was good. Its hard mode did that. It actually moved around some of like the key items and changed where enemies appeared, and also like reduced the amount of resources you picked up. And I thought that was great. It kind of changed up the experience in a way. And it also brought back, for people who are familiar with Resident Evil, like saving games used to require a consumable item, and it was a limited resource. They gave you more than enough for really getting through, but you still had that pressure of like, well, I've only found 4 saves right now, so I can't really blow these all. And then by the end of the game, usually you had way more than you needed. And usually in the hard mode for Resident Evil 7, they actually put a consumable item in there, but the normal one lets you infinitely save. I like that. I like those kind of interesting modifiers that really significantly change the experience without adjusting things that I find cheap. Which, that's the other thing though, is Resident Evil also usually does this in its hard modes, and I think that's just where it's just a bridge too far. Is they tick up the difficulty in some of the cheap ways. Enemies deal more damage. They also take less damage from attacks. They're more aggressive, and on top of being different enemy types at different places. But yeah, they become more damage spongy. They deal more damage. They're usually quicker, and you know, by consequence, you take more damage, and you have less resources to deal with that threat. And I feel like that's a bridge too far. Now, granted, I'd be willing to compromise on, well, hard mode should, you know, have the remix of items and the different enemy placements, and you have to deal with that. And then another hard mode that actually upped all that. But I feel like those are two different types of difficulty modes, and I don't feel that's compatible to throw. I think it's unfair, or I think it's unfun to throw all those extra difficult stuff on top of it. Oh, also they stagger less. Like usually if you hit them in the right critical points, you can stagger them, or like disable them long enough for you to like avoid them and things like that. But yeah, I think that's just a bridge too far. I hate it when the difficulty goes up in such a way that it makes the game feel like less fun and just like cheap. Like it's just artificial difficulty, and I mean it is artificial, but it doesn't feel like it's actually adding new challenge. It's just there to make the game more difficult, and not in a way that engages you in a better way to makes you play smarter. Now there are some types of action games where that makes sense. Like the aggressiveness, it's great when like they have new moves. Like if you fight an enemy and it has new moves that you haven't seen before, and so you have to deal with that in a different way. That's cool. But then it taking more hits to die, it also, you know, and dealing more damage to you, so you have to make fewer mistakes and you have less to deal with on top of the lower resources, so you can't even do it. Like, yeah, I feel like some of that's just like they go too far, and it's not the right balance, and it's not actual like engaging difficulty. So that's what I don't like. I like it when things get changed up in different difficulty settings and actually change the experience, so there's more validation. So even easy mode, like they're like, hey, if you play on easy mode, like you're gonna see these types of different things. It's like, oh, that might actually encourage me to play it just to see it. But I hate it when it's just like we're just gonna adjust health meters and damage meters, and it's, you know, it goes up or down, and it becomes just frustrating to do normal stuff. So that's for me. What about you guys?
I can't say I ever thought that deeply about it, honestly. Like, I just choose the mode that I'm most comfortable playing in, and then, you know, either if it gets too difficult, I can switch it to something easier, vice versa. But I don't really like. I'm not really like. It has to. You have to fight an enemy, or like the enemy has to like gain some sort of like ability or something. Like I don't care if it's like the health going up or down, or the enemy getting stronger or weaker. Like it never like. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I never really thought about it, but I guess it doesn't matter to me.
Okay, well, hopefully,
I
maybe.
don't know if that's a bad answer, but
No, that's fine. Well, maybe
Yeah.
this conversation will inspire next time you play a game and you're experimenting with difficulty settings. Maybe you'll think about that and you'll be able to be like, oh, you know what? It was really cool that was different between easy and normal. And I wish they'd do that. Or maybe you'll think about that next time when you're playing a game in that experience. So even that's cool. But yeah, that's your opinion right now, and that's fine. And your opinion may change in the future.
yeah.
Yeah, Ed, any thoughts on like what you like seeing in different difficulty settings?
I one game I was thinking of while you were talking was The World Ends With You for the DS and later on the Switch and mobile. In that game, there were difficulty options like easy, medium, and hard, which I think I played on normal for most of the game until I got to the end when, well, I don't want to give any spoilers, but
Yeah.
part of the gameplay would change, and it got a little too challenging for me to keep track of all the different options, because the original game was on two screens and you had to control two characters at once,
Right.
and one of the characters you had was particularly challenging in its mechanics, so I had to bump it down. But the cool thing they did in that game was you could actually lower your level. Like if you were level 10, you could lower your level all the way down to level 1, and you would get greater rewards from battles for doing that. So you would get more money, you would get better item drops, and I liked that idea. I thought that was a good idea. I hope they do something similar in the sequel that comes out next month. I'm excited to see what they do with that. But I thought that was something that was really well done in terms of giving you a reward for challenging yourself a little bit more. And it was even relative to the difficulty like you chose. So if you were finding that you were most comfortable on easy, you could still take advantage of challenging yourself a little more on that difficulty level by lowering your level. And that kind of does get into the thing we talked about earlier, where RPGs do give the option to control your own difficulty, but that was another twist on that in terms of if you felt like you were over leveled, you even got more bonuses for lowering your level. But
then
I like difficulties where they what were you saying, Mike?
Oh, sorry, there's like a delay.
I like difficulties where you
Go ahead, Mike, you can do your thought.
Oh, there was just a delay. Never mind. I don't remember what I was thinking.
Okay.
I like difficulties where they tweak a number of things. Like I was looking at, it doesn't really tell you, but you're able to look it up for Persona. If you look at the difficulty levels, they change a number of things. They change damage received, damage dealt, experience, and like items and money that you earn. And I think it's good for a game to maybe look at all aspects of how you have to manage your resource. I like the way they tweak that. So I think I don't want a game where the only thing they change is the health bars on your enemies. So I'm kind of with you that they need to think about the balance a little bit, and how they can affect it in a more holistic way.
Oh, I know what I was thinking. Like, when does like too many options become too much of a hassle for the player? Like, if you can tweak too many things, is that going too far?
Ooh, that's a good question, Mike. And I think we're going to have to postpone answering that question for the quality of life topic we will eventually do in the future. If everything goes well, listeners, our next episode is going to be reviewing E3 if we're all caught up on it. If not, we'll do a different topic in the meantime. Maybe we'll do quality of life next time since we're currently thinking about a lot of that stuff. But that's that our plan right now is to do E3 in review and then kick off a series reviewing all the different platforms, and we'll do that consecutively. And the current plan is Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox, and then kind of touch on some of the other stuff like Xbox, PC, VR, and even talk about like some of the older ones like the history of Sega and our experiences with that. And then any other platforms.
Mobile could be
Sorry,
one.
mobile.
I've been getting into more mobile games with Apple Arcade, and I would
Maybe
love to talk
PC and
about
mobiles combined, but I don't know. We'll talk about that and figure it out. But yeah, listeners, so we're planning on doing like a series that kicks off with E3 because we're hoping that the Nintendo Switch Pro gets announced and we can talk about the details that we see there and compare it to what we know about the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series consoles. You know, what we are expecting and stuff. So plus all the new games that are coming out for the next year and what is finally is and isn't happening in terms of the different platforms after an E3 because that's when a lot of big announcements. So we feel like that's a great series there, and then we'll kind of get into return to the other kind of topical stuff that we've been doing here. But yeah, because I like we didn't even get to talk about with difficulty settings. I was like Mike's question was great. Is what wins too many options? I wanted to talk about the dynamic difficulty of Resident Evil and how you feel about that and how that feeds into some of the other things where it's like like the Mario assistive feature where it's like if or even the AI assistive thing where you could let they'll put in the AI player, like AI Luigi. It was one of the new Super Mario Brothers games, right, Mike? Where like if you died enough times, it would like, hey, do you want Luigi to just clear this for you? And then it would just have the computer like get past that one part for you, and then you could press the button and jump back in. So stuff like that.
So, yeah.
Huh? Yeah.
I believe so. I'm trying to think which game you're talking about.
Yeah, I think
you're not talking about New Super Luigi, right? That was a separate game.
Maybe it was New Super Luigi, but that would have been one of the new Super Mario games technically.
That was a more difficult.
Or Donkey Kong, even. Maybe the Donkey Kong had like the special like golden Donkey Kong, Golden DK or Golden Diddy, and got you past puzzles. We'll have to double check it. But yeah, like all these different things that come out for difficulty and dynamic difficulty.
Before we start like making up stuff.
Yeah, I know it exists. I just don't remember which games it's in. I know those are there, and I think that's kind of cool.
No, I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying like I don't know which game it's for.
Yeah. And then also talking about like so yeah, like the different difficulties, the things we like adjusted, things we like to see, and yeah, just and then any other things we'd like to be difficulty settings to do in the future. So yeah, I think that will kind of all be held off till the quality of life topic, and definitely we went a lot further in this, and so there's still this ended up being a lot more fascinating than I think we started off thinking that it would be. But yeah, so thank you to all our listeners in our audience who are with us today. We hope you check out some of the older episodes if you're new, and we hope that you'll stick with us whether you're returning or not into the future. We're looking forward to the next set of discussions that we've got coming up with post E3 with everyone. Yeah, any other closing thoughts, guys, before we go?
Nope.
Okay, and thank you so much, everyone.
Get good, people. Get good, people. That's all I gotta say.
And we'll see you next time.
Get good, have fun. Oh, and one last announcement as well, is that we are moving the episodes to the Option Menu Crew dedicated channel. Episode 25 should have just gone up at this point, so please go over there and subscribe on that channel if you're interested in following with it, or the playlist will be moved over there and you can see all that. Right now, the current playlist on YouTube is on my personal channel, and that will eventually be going away once I have some new information, but for now it's kind of the difference is split, but the new episodes will be uploaded to the other channel. You should be able to find them in the same playlist on YouTube for that, and we are hoping to bring the episodes to other audio only podcast service distribution in the near future as well. So look forward to that. If you're going to support us, we appreciate you listening, and if not, and share and whatnot and enjoy. But just some news for anyone who's checking in and anyone who's new. Thank you so much. Yes. Goodbye. Till the next time.
Bye. Bye.
We did it.